Hello everyone, my name is Beck, and because this is the very first episode of Clear Files, I wanted to give a very quick personal introduction to the video and also a quick disclaimer before we start. So firstly, the topic of our interview of this video is going to be Black Lives Matter, which is a movement that I'm sure all of you are already familiar with, but just in case you aren't, I'll give a very brief description about what it is. So Black Lives Matter is a movement based mostly in America, but also with branches around the world, including Korea, that basically advocates for racial justice and equality. Um, Obviously, it is a lot more than that, and it is continuing to expand every day. I will be talking more about that in this video and also in future videos potentially. So please, as you're watching the video, if there's anything that you don't understand, there's a pretty good chance that it might come out later on in the video. So make sure to watch everything to help your understanding about what's going on. And as always, if there are any questions or if you would like to follow up with me about anything that's being said on the interview, or if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And before we start, just a quick disclaimer that we're all people. I'm a person. The people I am interviewing are all people. And obviously, that does mean that there might be some level of bias in what we say. So make sure that you don't take everything that we're saying for granted. And also, please keep in mind that everything that's being said are our personal views and our personal ideas, except for instances where we're citing specific sources. So also keep that in mind as you're watching the video and all future videos. Thank you very much, and without any further ado, I'll begin my interview. All right, hello, and yeah, hey. So basically, the first topic of our interview will be about Black Lives Matter, the BLM movement in for short. But before we get into that, I first wanted you to quickly introduce yourself to the people watching this video.
Hi, I'm Snad Lamichani, and I'm the treasurer and the technical lead of the BBSU.
Yes, and the BBSU, quickly, could you just introduce what that stands for and what it
The
is?
BBSU is an affinity group started in Chadwick School. It stands for the Brown Black Student Union. It's a safe space for all people of color.
All right. Thank you once again for joining this interview. And I'd just like to quickly get started with the actual interview by asking you what exactly is BLM? You know, what does it stand for? Maybe if you can kind of give us a brief overview of how it started as well.
So the Black Lives Matter movement has been here for ages. It's not something new. It didn't really start like yesterday or like during the pandemic. It's actually been here since even before the Black Panthers, before Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech is when it really erupted, but it's been here for a while. So the Black Lives Matter movement, or BLM, is saying that Black lives matter, that Black lives should be treated as equal lives, and it's not saying that Black lives only matter. That's that's not what it's saying. It's saying that currently in the space we are right now in our environment, Black people are under so much how to say they're under so much prejudice, so much racial hate.
Yeah.
People really go out of their way to make it hard for them to just do whatever they want to do, and when they're really not even harming themselves. So in that way, Black Lives Matter. A recent example would be of Mr. Bernard, who was wrongfully executed, I think yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though there was. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I think basically BLM, you know, it's about fighting for Black lives, and I feel like you touched on this is something that a lot of people maybe misunderstand is that it only stands for the rights of Black people. The truth is, you know, it's advocating for Black people's rights, not because, you know, they think Black people should have more rights. It's because Black people currently are in a situation where they're being discriminated a lot. There's a lot of prejudice. I think that's what you said. And kind of tying into that, I also wanted to ask you, if we look at BLM, it's predominantly an issue, in America, in those kind of Western countries that we typically say. But then, so how relevant is BLM to countries like Korea or China, where maybe, the issue of systemic racism against minorities aren't as much of a major political issue?
Okay, so I think it's really relevant to even like to all Asian countries. Or at the end of the day, any of us who go to the U.S., we're going to be an immediate minority. That's just facts.
Right,
So people should care about BLM because it's not just us saying that we want to end this prejudice against Black people. It's us basically saying it's a starting another movement in itself of us saying we want to end racial prejudice against all. And it's only when we start caring about one, yeah, it's only when we start caring about one matter, like the Black Lives Matter, then we can start all these other movements, right? Like during the Corona pandemic, there was a lot of Asian Americans that was prejudiced against. Like there was like this old Chinese guy who got beaten up.
right,
Like people who were like just of Asian descent were being incredibly like prejudiced against, right? But
yeah,
once we there's no solving the Black Lives Matter movement, but once we remove the racial prejudice against like Black people in the States, then we can go towards then we can go towards like Asians, and then down the road we can even go towards South Asians, Southeast Asians, Middle East people.
right,
Like it's basically us fighting. It's the start for the fight of equality.
right. And I think kind of
So I think that's why
expanding,
it matters.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and just to kind of expand on that idea, I know um, one of the BLM movement's goals is also not just with regards to racial injustice, but also with regards to other minorities, for example, LGBTQ people. So kind of expanding into those areas as well. And I think you brought up a really good point is, BLM is more of a starting point rather than just the final ending point. It's not just about solving racial injustice only for Black people. It can branch out to other categories. Um, but also
Sorry.
touching on, oh,
Uh,
sorry.
it's not. It can. It will branch out. It
Yeah,
has to.
yeah. And to also kind of touch on that idea, I think something that I want to ask, this is an interview, so I'll be asking a lot, is uh, right now in Korea, for example, I'm just using Korea as an example because we're both in Korea at the moment. It's in a way almost impossible to completely escape at least some level of racial bias, um, or at least that's what the general idea is. Is maybe even if we're not directly being racist, sometimes there's that subconscious prejudice, subconscious discrimination. So, what is BLM's take on that, and how does BLM think we can kind of work on that as a society to solve that kind of subconscious level racism or prejudice?
Well, I don't think it's more of a BLM only matter.
Mm.
It's not like something the BLM can have a take on. It's something we all need to have a take on.
Right.
And of course, there's no just direct checklist or a point of action, but it's just we need to remove this racial prejudice against in our like from ourselves. Like you said, no matter how subconscious it is, we need to educate ourselves and we need to grow and learn from these teachings. And it's so easy to educate yourself nowadays. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
this is a great I have a great example against the subconscious thing, okay? So I come from Nepal. It's a country between China and India.
Yes.
And ever since I've been growing up, when I used to grow up in Nepal, I lived for 14 years, okay? There was always be an ad called Fair and Lovely, right? It was a face cream, Fair and Lovely.
Okay.
And the point was that the fairer you are, the much more lovelier you are, the much more appealing you are, right?
Yeah.
When you're young, you don't see the racial discrimination, the
Right.
racial bias in that ad. And now, like after this whole Black Lives Matter movement, a comedian, Hassan Minaj, he's also from South Asia, he brought it up. He said, why do we think that Fair and Lovely is acceptable? The brand itself is inherently racist.
Right.
And so there's a lot of people I know who like they're just boycotting the company. They're just not using it. They know it's morally wrong to support something that's so openly racist.
Right.
You know, and it's not like they just woke up one day and they realized it. It's they woke up, then they saw it. They saw the video Hassan Manash put out. They
Yeah.
did some research on their own and they understood why it was wrong. They learned why it was wrong, and then they made the decision to grow away from the company. I
Right.
think that's important. And it's not a BLM take, like you said. It's just a take on all of us. Like it's like just because a movement has started doesn't mean we need to do this. We should be doing this on our own
Right.
at all times. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. I think kind of the key thing with a lot of these issues is really just educating yourself and being aware of these kind of prejudices, these kind of discriminations. Sometimes it's not as obvious as in the example that you just gave. Sometimes it's more, oh, I didn't really think of it that way, but now that I look at it, yeah, I can totally see how that could potentially come off as racist or sexist or otherwise discriminatory. And so, kind of moving on from that a little bit, what are BLM's primary goals or objectives, if you get what I mean? For example, like what is something that BLM maybe wants to achieve in 2021?
Racial equality. I mean, well, I don't think they can achieve that in 2021, but that's their goal. Racial equality is their. They want Black Lives Matter on the same level as White Lives Matter.
Yeah.
What I mean? Yeah, I mean that's the main goal, and they're working on it. They're working through it through many short goals, but of course, it's too many to either list out, or it's just too hard to kind of condense into words for a 30-minute interview. But the main goal is to achieve racial equality, and that's by education. I mean, during the entire, I guess the rising popularity of the Black Lives Matter movement during the summer, were you on social media?
Was I on social media?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Did you
yeah,
check your social? Yeah, and so you could have seen that everyone was posting links to educate yourself on the movement,
right.
right?
Yeah,
The BBSU sent some links with educational resources out during our first email.
yes,
So by providing these educational materials, by raising awareness, by getting people to fight the good fight, is how we're going to achieve racial equality, and that's their goal. That's what they're working on. That's what they will be working on, so that they can reach this point where Black lives do matter on the same level as white lives or other lives. Like Black lives matter at that point.
yeah. And I think I definitely checked out those kind of links that were sent out. I know a lot of my peers also did have a look through. But then, as I'm sure you know, the reason BLM is such a major social issue in today's society is not just because of the strong support it has, but also the strong opposition, right? And that's why there's that kind of debate as to, like, oh, is it something that's actually good for society? Is it something that's bad for society? BBSU's take obviously is that it's good for society. Um, but then I wanted to ask you, from the perspective of someone who is a supporter of BLM, why do you think some people are opposed to the idea of BLM?
It's okay. It's just because they don't either understand the movement or they've just not educated themselves on it. I know people from our school, Chadwick, was posting All Lives Matter on social media, and it's not like they're like All Lives Matter supporters or something, but it's just I believe that they don't really get it. They just hear they hear Black Lives Matter, and they're like, what about us? They don't
Right,
understand it. So I believe that the people are scared of supremacy, in my opinion. And when people hear Black Lives Matter, they don't realize that we are just saying, hey, we want Black lives to matter at the same level that all lives matter. Like
right,
Black lives should matter, like how white lives matter, how Asian lives matter. Black lives matter. That's the point. But people think when they hear Black Lives Matter, the opposition thinks they want they want black supremacy. You understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? They want black supremacy, and for some reason I don't know how someone could logically jump to that conclusion if they even did a quick Google search about the issue. But that's where their brain goes to. They're scared of this black supremacy, which isn't happening because people just want racial equality.
Right.
So I think uh, it's just not educating yourself properly, or it's just not researching enough.
Yeah.
And of course, some people do have it tied into their political views, and no matter how much you argue with them, it won't change. But it's just something that needs a matter of education more than anything else.